Introductions. Today I want to teach you that when literary essayists craft introductions, they work to help readers understand what's significant about their text. One way they do this is by beginning with a universal statement before introducing the text and their claim. A universal statement is something that could apply to many different stories in literature and in life. Why don't you pause the screencast while you set up your notebook to look like this? Okay, so these are three possible universal statements. The world can be, sometimes in life and in literature, authors write a lot about, you see how these really are going to allow you to write a statement that can be applied to many different stories. The most important part of your essay is your thesis, of course, or your claim or big idea about your story. I want to show you an exercise I did. I wrote a few different introductions to practice these techniques a little bit to my essay on shells. Remember the thesis we wrote, things can get better if you change? Take a look at these three possible introductions. There's some things that are the same about them. There's some things that are different about them. They all end with the same couple of sentences. They all begin with a universal statement, although each one is different. They all retell the story briefly in three different ways, and each one of these connects the problem in the story back to the thesis. So here's one. The world can be a tough place for someone who has faced a major loss, especially if that someone is a kid. See how universal that is. In the story Shells by Cynthia Rylant, Michael loses his parents and moves in with his Aunt Esther, who at first seems not to care about his needs. See, that's the brief retelling of the story. Luckily, things don't stay that way forever. Now, here's where in all three of these introductions, I connect the text to the thesis. Shells teaches that things can get better if you change. This is true for Sluggo, for Aunt Esther, and most of all, for Michael. Okay, here's my second crack at it. In life, everyone faces hard times. Some people face hard times in school, and some people face hard times at home. How you deal with those hard times is what makes all the difference. That is a very universal statement that can be applied to so many different stories. Now we get specific. In the short story Shells by Cynthia Rylant, Michael has hard times because his parents recently died, and he has to move in with his Aunt Esther, who doesn't seem to care about him at first. See, that's my retelling. And now I circle back and connect the problem to my thesis. Shells teaches that things can get better if you change. This is true for Sluggo, for Aunt Esther, and most of all for Michael. Okay, I tried again. Starting with a universal statement, in literature, authors write a lot about characters who face particularly tough times. What's fascinating to see is that characters respond to these problems in different ways. See how this is so universal? You could almost start a million different essays with that statement. But now I hone in on Shells by Cynthia Rylant is filled with characters who change gradually when they encounter problems. Shells teaches that things can get better if you change. This is true for Sluggo, for Aunt Esther, and most of all for Michael. So please notice, universal, 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 brief retelling, three different ways, and then circle back to connect the thesis to the problem in the story. All right, I want you to pause the screencast again because these are some other statements that you can use, very universal. So go ahead and pause and add these to your notebook now. Okay, there are times when in life you should always, or in life you should never, or sometimes people. Very broad general statements. Okay. Today, you're going to write three possible introductions for the essay that you're working on right now, your literary essay. Here are a few tips for you as you try this work. Pause the screencast and please add these 4 tips to your notebook. 1, begin with a phrase that lets you speak universally. 2, include your claim and supports. 3, connect your universal idea to the big problem in the text. I think perhaps 3 is the most important tip, connecting that universal idea to the big problem in the story that you have decided to write your literary essay on. And finally, write a brief summary of the text. And you saw me do that 3 different ways. Your work for today is to try writing 3 different possible introductions for your literary essay using a universal statement. Remember, you've recorded a few in your notebook. Be sure to briefly retell the story and connect the problem in the story to your thesis statement. Then, choose the one you like best to use as your new introduction. All right, off you go.